The scent of garlic and tomato sauce hung heavy in the air, mingling with the metallic clatter of silverware against porcelain. My feet ached after 8 hours of gliding between tables, the thin soles of my black service shoes offering little protection against the hard tile floor of Bellini's. My uniform, a crisp white blouse and black skirt that had seen better days, clung to my skin with the sweat of honest work. "Table 7 needs their check, Emma," Diane called from behind the bar, not bothering to look up from the martini she was mixing. I nodded, tucking a strand of copper hair behind my ear. 8 months at Bellini's, and I still felt invisible most days. The restaurant sat on the edge of the city's financial district, catering to businessmen with expense accounts and tourists looking for authentic Italian cuisine. Tonight was unusually busy for a Thursday, and my section was filled with suits celebrating some corporate victory I'd never understand. The group at table 7 had been difficult from the moment they sat down. 4 men in tailored suits with watches that probably cost more than I made in 6 months. They'd sent back the wine twice, complained that the pasta was overcooked, and now they were laughing too loudly, their faces flushed with alcohol and privilege. I approached with their check, trying to make myself small and unobtrusive. "Gentlemen, whenever you're ready," I said, placing the black folder in the center of the table. The one closest to me, sandy hair, face flushed from too many scotches, glanced at the bill and snorted. "Almost $300 for mediocre pasta. Highway robbery." I maintained my professional smile, the one that never quite reached my eyes. "I hope you enjoyed your meal despite that. Can I get you anything else?" The man to his left, older with silver streaking his temples, looked me up and down with the kind of gaze that made me want to shower immediately. "What else are you offering, sweetheart?" His companions laughed, and I felt my cheeks burn. I'd learned to deal with comments like these. They were as much a part of the uniform as my non-slip shoes. "Just the check tonight, sir," I replied, my voice steady even as my stomach churned. The first man slapped down a credit card without looking at me. I took the folder and retreated to the payment terminal, feeling their eyes on my back as I walked away. 20 minutes later, after I'd processed the payment and returned the receipt, I discovered they'd left no tip on a $287 bill and had written, "Service was as flat as your chest" on the merchant copy, the words blurred as tears threatened to spill. I blinked them back furiously. I couldn't afford to cry here, not when I still had 2 more tables to close out. "Everything okay, Emma?" Diane asked, her eyes softening as she noticed my expression. "Fine," I said quickly, tucking the receipt into my apron pocket. "Just tired." It was nearly midnight when I finally hung up my apron. The restaurant had emptied, save for a few lingering diners enjoying espresso and tiramisu. I counted my tips, $127 for the night. Not terrible, but that missing 50-cent dollar from table 7 would have made a difference toward this month's rent. As I stepped out into the crisp autumn air, I noticed a sleek black Bentley idling by the curb, its engine a soft purr against the backdrop of distant traffic. My heart skipped. I recognized that car. The back window rolled down silently, revealing a face that never failed to make my breath catch. Alessandro Ricci watched me from the shadows of the back seat, his dark eyes reflecting the streetlights. At 32, my husband possessed the kind of beauty that belonged in Renaissance paintings. Sharp cheekbones, full lips, and thick black hair that curled slightly at the ends. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him like armor, the crimson tie a slash of color against the monochrome. "You're late," he said softly, his Italian accent more pronounced when we were alone. I glanced back at the restaurant, where Diane was locking up. "Busy night," I explained, moving toward the car as the driver, Marco, one of Sandro's ever-present security team, stepped out to open the door for me. Alessandro's eyes narrowed slightly. "You've been crying." It wasn't a question. Nothing ever escaped his notice, especially when it came to me. I slid into the leather seat beside him, the warmth of the car a welcome relief from the October chill. "It's nothing," I said, leaning in to kiss him lightly. He caught my chin between his fingers, holding me in place as his gaze searched mine. "Emma," he said, my name a warning and a caress all at once. "Tell me." I sighed, knowing he wouldn't let it go. "Just some rude customers. They stiffed me on the tip and left a nasty note. It happens all the time." His expression didn't change, but I felt the shift in him, the subtle tensing of his body, the darkening of his eyes. Alessandro had a gift for stillness, for containing violence within the elegant lines of his posture. "Which table?" he asked, his voice deceptively calm. "It doesn't matter, Sandro. Really, I'm fine." He released my chin and tapped on the privacy glass. Marco lowered it an inch. "Take us home," Alessandro instructed, then raised the glass again. I rested my head against his shoulder, breathing in the scent of his cologne. Cedar and bergamot, expensive and distinctive. We'd been married for nearly a year, and sometimes I still couldn't believe he was mine, or perhaps more accurately, that I was his. We'd met at Bellini's, ironically enough. I was new to the city, desperate for work after fleeing a broken engagement in my hometown. Alessandro was a regular at the restaurant, always sitting at the same corner table, always alone, except for the shadow of a bodyguard nearby. He requested me as his server after our first encounter, and I found myself looking forward to his visits. The generous tips, the quiet conversation, the way he actually saw me when so many others looked through me. I didn't know then who he really was, what he really did. By the time I discovered the truth, that my charming, attentive boyfriend was not just a successful businessman, but the head of one of the city's most powerful criminal organizations, I was already in too deep, already in love with the man behind the reputation. "You should have called me," he murmured against my hair as the car glided through the near-empty streets. "I would have picked you up earlier." "I can't call you every time I work late," I protested weakly. "You have more important things to do." His arm tightened around me. "Nothing is more important than you. When will you understand that?" The possessiveness in his voice should have frightened me. Instead, it warmed something deep inside, filling the hollow places left by years of feeling insignificant. Alessandro might be dangerous to the rest of the world, but with me, he was protective, devoted, sometimes obsessively so. He'd given me a life I never could have imagined. The penthouse apartment with views of the city skyline, the designer clothes hanging in my closet, the diamond wedding ring that felt too heavy on my finger some days. But he'd also insisted I keep my job at Bellini's, understanding my need for independence, for something that was just mine. It was the one boundary he hadn't crossed, though I sometimes caught glimpses of his men watching the restaurant during my shifts. When we reached our building, a sleek high-rise in the most exclusive part of the city, Marco opened the door, and Alessandro led me inside with his hand at the small of my back. The night doorman nodded respectfully as we passed. In the private elevator that required a key card to access the penthouse, Alessandro finally kissed me properly, his hands cradling my face as if I were something precious. "You taste like wine," he observed, his thumb brushing over my lower lip. "Complimentary glass after my shift," I explained. "Diego thought I looked like I needed it." Something flashed in Alessandro's eyes. Diego is very observant. The elevator doors opened directly into our apartment. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the glittering cityscape below, a private universe of light and shadow. I kicked off my shoes and padded across the marble floor to the kitchen, suddenly aware of how hungry I was. I'd been too busy to eat during my shift. Alessandro followed, removing his suit jacket and draping it over a chair. He watched as I rummaged through the refrigerator, eventually settling on leftover risotto from the meal our housekeeper had prepared earlier. "Tell me about these men," he said suddenly, as I placed the bowl in the microwave. I stiffened. "I told you, it's not important." "It's important to me." His voice was soft, but I recognized the steel beneath. "You were crying, Emma. That makes it important." The microwave hummed in the silence between us. I turned to face him, leaning against the counter. They were just typical entitled businessmen. They spent almost $300 on dinner and drinks, complained about everything, made some inappropriate comments, and then left no tip. One of them wrote something rude on the receipt. What did they write? I looked away, heat rising in my cheeks. "It doesn't matter." He moved closer, invading my space with his presence. Alessandro was tall, broad-shouldered, imposing even in the safety of our home. "Emma," he said, my name a command on his lips. "They said..." I swallowed. "They said the service was as flat as my chest." His expression didn't change, but I saw the muscle in his jaw twitch. "And they said this to your face?" "No. They wrote it on the receipt after I'd walked away. Cowards, he muttered. The microwave beeped, but neither of us moved. What did they look like? These men. A chill ran down my spine. Sandro, no. You promised me you wouldn't interfere with my work. I'm not interfering. I'm asking a simple question. His fingers traced the line of my collarbone. Feather light. What did they look like, my love? I recognized the danger in his gentleness, but found myself answering anyway. 4 men in expensive suits. One had sandy hair, another had gray at his temples. They were loud, drinking scotch. The receipt was signed by someone named James Harrington. Alessandro's eyes flickered with recognition. Harrington, he repeated, the name sounding different in his accent. From Metro Capital? My stomach dropped. You know him? A small smile played at the corner of his mouth. This city is smaller than you think, especially in certain circles. He reached past me to open the microwave, retrieving my forgotten dinner. Eat. You're exhausted. I took the bowl, watching him warily. Sandro, promise me you won't do anything. They're not worth it. He kissed my forehead. You are worth everything. It wasn't the promise I'd asked for. As I ate, Alessandro poured himself a glass of whiskey and stood by the windows, gazing out at the city that, in many ways, belonged to him. I wondered, not for the first time, what it cost him to love someone like me. Ordinary, unpolished, a simple waitress with nothing to offer but her heart. He turned, catching me watching him. What are you thinking? I set down my spoon. That I'll never understand why you chose me. He crossed the room in 3 long strides, taking the bowl from my hands and setting it aside. Then he lifted me effortlessly, setting me on the countertop so our eyes were level. You think I chose you? His hands framed my face, thumbs brushing over my cheekbones. Emma, from the moment you walked up to my table with that shy smile, there was never any choice for either of us. His kiss was possessive, consuming. A reminder that whatever fragile independence I maintained was merely an illusion. I belonged to Alessandro Ricci, body and soul, just as surely as the city lights beyond our windows. And as his hands moved to my waist, as he carried me from the kitchen toward our bedroom, I pushed away the nagging worry about what tomorrow might bring for James Harrington and his friends. Some things were better not to know, and when it came to my husband's business, ignorance was its own kind of protection. What I didn't realize then was that my careless mention of that name would set in motion events that would shatter the careful balance of my double life, forcing me to confront exactly what it meant to be the wife of a man everyone feared, but no one refused. I woke to the sound of the shower running and the scent of fresh coffee drifting from the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, painting golden stripes across the empty space beside me. I stretched, feeling the pleasant ache in my muscles from last night's lovemaking. Alessandro had been particularly intense, almost desperate in his passion, as if trying to mark me, claim me in the most primal way. The digital clock on the nightstand read 9:37 a.m. I frowned, sitting up abruptly. I was supposed to open Bellini's at 10 gas for the lunch shift. You're awake, Alessandro said from the bathroom doorway, a towel slung low around his hips, droplets of water clinging to his chest. He looked devastatingly handsome in the morning light, his dark hair slicked back, the shadow of stubble along his jaw. I'm late, I said, scrambling out of bed. Why didn't you wake me? I have to open the restaurant. I called Diego, he replied calmly, moving to the walk-in closet. You're not going in today. I froze halfway to the bathroom. You did what? I told him you weren't feeling well. Alessandro emerged with a crisp white shirt, beginning to dress with the methodical precision that characterized everything he did. He was very understanding. You had no right to do that, I said, heat rising in my cheeks. That's my job, Sandro. We agreed you wouldn't interfere. He paused, his dark eyes finding mine. You needed rest. That's not your decision to make. My voice rose despite my efforts to stay calm. This wasn't the first time we'd had this argument. Alessandro's need to control, to protect, often crossed the boundaries I tried to establish. He finished buttoning his shirt, his expression unreadable. I have meetings this morning. Wear something nice for dinner tonight. I'm taking you out. You can't just change the subject, I protested. We need to talk about this. We will, he promised, crossing the room to kiss me lightly. Tonight. I've arranged for Valentina to take you shopping this afternoon. Buy whatever you like. I don't need new clothes, I said, even as I leaned into his touch, my anger already fading beneath his attention. It was maddening how easily he could disarm me. Humor me, he murmured against my lips. I want to see you in something beautiful tonight. Before I could argue further, his phone vibrated. He checked it, his expression shifting subtly from lover to businessman in an instant. I have to go. Marco will be downstairs if you need anything. Marco? I echoed. I don't need a babysitter, Sandro. He tucked his phone into his pocket, already moving toward the door. It's not negotiable, Emma. Not today. There was something in his tone that stopped my protest. A tension I couldn't quite identify. Is everything okay? I asked, suddenly anxious. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Of course. I'll see you tonight at 7. After he left, I stood in the silence of our enormous apartment, feeling strangely unsettled. Alessandro was always protective, but this felt different. The timing, coming right after I'd mentioned those men from the restaurant, made me uneasy. I showered and dressed in jeans and a soft cashmere sweater, one of the many items Alessandro had bought me despite my insistence that I didn't need such expensive things. In the kitchen, I found a note beside the coffee machine in his elegant handwriting. Enjoy your day off. Ti amo sempre. Love. That was never our problem. It was everything that came with it. The secrets, the control, the knowing and not knowing. I sipped my coffee by the window, watching the city below. From this height, people looked like miniature figures in a diorama, their lives intersecting and diverging in patterns I couldn't discern. Somewhere down there, Alessandro was conducting his business, making decisions that affected those lives in ways I preferred not to contemplate. My phone buzzed with a text from Valentina, Alessandro's cousin. Car downstairs at noon. Ready to make my cousin bankrupt with shopping? I smiled despite myself. Valentina was one of the few people in Alessandro's circle who treated me normally, who saw me as Emma rather than just the boss's wife. She'd been the first to welcome me, to help me navigate the complexities of entering Alessandro's world. At 28, only a few years older than me, she had a lightness about her that seemed at odds with the family business. Looking forward to it, I texted back, though shopping was the last thing on my mind. I spent the morning catching up on laundry and reading, trying to ignore the awareness of Marco waiting downstairs, undoubtedly watching the building's entrance. At noon exactly, another text from Valentina announced her arrival. In the lobby, I found her chatting animatedly with Marco, who stood with the rigid posture of a soldier, despite the designer suit that made him look more like a model. He nodded respectfully as I approached. Mrs. Ricci, he said formally. Emma, I corrected for what felt like the 100th time. Just Emma is fine, Marco. Valentina linked her arm through mine, her perfume enveloping me in a cloud of jasmine. Don't bother, she said with a laugh. These guys are allergic to informality. Ready for some serious damage to Sandro's credit card? Unlike her cousin, Valentina was fair and blonde, her mother having been Swedish. She wore her hair in a sleek bob and dressed with an effortless elegance I could never quite manage to replicate. Marco followed us to the waiting car, another black Bentley, though not the one Alessandro typically used. As we slid into the back seat, I noticed a second vehicle idling nearby, containing 2 more men I recognized from Alessandro's security team. Is all this really necessary? I asked quietly as we pulled away from the curb. 2 cars for a shopping trip? Valentina's smile faltered slightly. Sandro's just being cautious. There's been some business tension lately. My stomach tightened. What kind of tension? She waved a hand dismissively. Nothing for you to worry about. Just boring family business stuff. Now tell me what happened at the restaurant last night. Sandro was in quite a mood when he called this morning. I stared at her. He told you about that? Not details. Just that some idiots were rude to you. She leaned closer, her voice dropping conspiratorially. Between us, I haven't seen him this angry in a long time. It was nothing, I insisted. Just some jerks who didn't leave a tip. Must have been more than that. she mused. Sandro doesn't get worked up over nothing. I looked out the window at the passing city, uncomfortable with the direction of the conversation. I don't want to talk about it. Where are we shopping? Valentina allowed the subject change, launching into a detailed itinerary of boutiques she'd selected. But her earlier comment lingered in my mind. I haven't seen him this angry in a long time. What exactly did that mean, and what happened when Alessandro Ricci got truly angry? The afternoon passed in a blur of exclusive boutiques where salespeople fawned over us, or rather, over the Ricci name. I tried on countless dresses under Valentina's critical eye, eventually settling on a deep emerald silk gown that she declared would make Sandro forget how to speak Italian. Perfect for Cavalli's tomorrow night, she said, as the salesperson wrapped the dress in tissue paper. I froze in the act of returning my jeans to the dressing room. Cavalli's? What's happening at Cavalli's? Valentina's eyes widened. Oh, shit. Was it supposed to be a surprise? The anniversary party for Antonio and Bianca? Alessandro didn't mention anything about a party, I said slowly. Antonio Cavalli was one of Alessandro's business partners, an older man who treated my husband with a fatherly affection that seemed at odds with their criminal connections. Well, now you have the perfect dress for it, Valentina said brightly, clearly trying to cover her slip. And Sandro probably just forgot to tell you. Men, right? But Alessandro never forgot details, especially not social obligations that involved his inner circle. The fact that he hadn't mentioned this party, scheduled for the very next day, felt deliberate. By the time we finished shopping, with significantly more bags than I'd intended, it was nearly 6. Valentina kissed my cheeks before departing in her own car, leaving me with Marco for the ride home. In the elevator to the penthouse, my arms laden with shopping bags, I found myself studying Marco's impassive face. Marco, I said impulsively, is something happening that I should know about? His expression didn't change, but he shifted slightly, his discomfort evident. It's not my place to say, Mrs. Ricci. Please, I pressed. If there's something going on with Alessandro, I need to know. He hesitated, then said carefully, the boss handles his business. Best for everyone if it stays that way. The elevator doors opened to our apartment, ending the conversation. I stepped out, frustration churning inside me. Always these walls of silence, these careful deflections. Sometimes I felt like I was living in a beautiful cage, protected but isolated. I had barely enough time to shower and prepare for dinner. I chose a simple black dress from my existing wardrobe, rather than any of the new purchases. A small act of defiance against Alessandro's orchestration of my day. I was applying lipstick when I heard the elevator doors open, announcing his return. He found me in the bathroom, his reflection appearing behind mine in the mirror. He'd changed suits since morning, now wearing a midnight blue that made his olive skin glow. His eyes traveled over me, lingering on the familiar dress. You didn't like anything Valentina helped you choose? He asked, his tone light, but his gaze sharp. I met his eyes in the mirror. We're going to talk about why you called Diego and told him I couldn't work today. A slight smile curved his lips. Direct as always, he murmured, stepping closer to rest his hands on my shoulders. I thought you deserved a day off after working so late. That's all. That's not your decision to make, I said, turning to face him. We agreed when we got married that I would keep my job and you would respect that. And I do respect it. His thumb traced my lower lip, smudging my carefully applied lipstick. But I also respect you enough to intervene when necessary. Necessary? I repeated. It wasn't necessary, Sandro. It was controlling. Something flashed in his eyes. Is it controlling to want to protect what's mine? I'm not a possession, I said, though my heartbeat quickened at the intensity of his gaze. Aren't you? His hand slid to my throat, resting there lightly, a reminder of his strength held carefully in check. You became mine the moment you said yes, Emma. Just as I became yours. I swallowed, feeling the gentle pressure of his fingers against my pulse. That's not how marriage works. It's how our marriage works, he corrected softly. I protect what's mine, always. Before I could respond, he kissed me, erasing my arguments with the skill he'd always possessed. When he finally pulled away, I was breathless, my lipstick completely ruined. We should go, I managed, trying to reclaim my composure. "We have reservations." His smile told me he knew exactly what effect he had on me. "Reapply your lipstick, Kara. We have time." Dinner was at Louis', an exclusive steakhouse where Alessandro had a standing private room reservation. As we were led through the main dining area, I couldn't help but notice the ripple of awareness that followed us, the quick glances, the subtle nods of acknowledgement directed at my husband. Alessandro moved through the world as if he owned it, and in many ways, he did. The private dining room was intimate, with dim lighting and a table set for two beside a window overlooking the river, a bottle of champagne already chilled in an ice bucket. "What are we celebrating?" I asked as the maitre d' pulled out my chair. Alessandro waited until we were alone before answering. "Do I need a special occasion to spoil my wife?" I studied him across the table, the candlelight casting shadows across his handsome face. "Valentina mentioned a party tomorrow night at Cavalli's for Antonio and Bianca's anniversary." If he was surprised by my knowledge, he didn't show it. "Yes. I meant to tell you this morning, but I was distracted." His lips curved in a suggestive smile. "You're quite distracting when you're sleeping naked in our bed. Is that why you bought me a new dress today? For the party?" He sipped his champagne. "Partly. You'll need to look exceptional tomorrow night. Antonio specifically asked if you would be attending." I frowned slightly. Why would Antonio ask about me? Alessandro's expression gave nothing away. "Because you charmed him at our wedding, and he's been half in love with you ever since." There was more to it than that, I was certain. But before I could press further, our server arrived with the first course. Oysters on ice, Alessandro's favorite. We ate in relative silence, the tension from earlier softening under the influence of excellent food and champagne. By the time dessert arrived, a dark chocolate soufflé we shared between us, I'd almost forgotten my suspicions, lulled by the intimacy of the moment, almost. "Sandro," I said, setting down my spoon, "I need you to be honest with me about something." His expression became guarded. "I'm always honest with you, Emma. Did you do something about those men from the restaurant? James Harrington and his friends?" For a long moment, he said nothing, simply watching me with those dark, unreadable eyes. Then he reached across the table to take my hand, his thumb caressing my wedding ring. "Would it upset you if I had?" he asked finally. My stomach dropped. "What did you do?" "Nothing they didn't deserve," he said softly. "Nothing that can be traced back to you or me." I pulled my hand away, suddenly cold despite the warmth of the restaurant. "I asked you not to get involved. I told you they weren't worth it, and I told you that you are worth everything." His voice remained calm, but I could see the steel beneath. "No one disrespects my wife." "No one. What exactly did you do, Alessandro?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He signaled for the check, effectively ending the conversation. "It's handled, Emma. They won't bother you or any other waitress again. That's all you need to know." In the car on the way home, I stared out the window, trying to process what he'd implied. Had he hurt those men? Threatened them? Worse? And all because of a crude comment and a missing tip. Alessandro placed his hand on my knee, his touch proprietary. "You're overthinking this. How can I not?" I turned to face him. "You did something to those men, something I specifically asked you not to do. And now you won't even tell me what it was." "I'm protecting you," he said simply. "Sometimes that means keeping certain details to myself. I'm not some delicate flower that needs to be shielded from reality, Sandro. I know who you are, what you do." His expression softened. "Do you? Really?" He moved closer, his arm sliding around me. "You know parts of me, Emma. The parts I choose to show you. The rest would only hurt you." I rested my head against his shoulder, exhaustion suddenly overwhelming me. "I just don't want anyone hurt because of me." His lips brushed my hair. Some people deserve to hurt. When we returned home, Alessandro disappeared into his study to make some calls, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I changed into a nightgown and stood by the bedroom window, watching the distant pinpricks of light on the river, boats moving through the darkness, each carrying its own stories, its own secrets. I thought about James Harrington and what might have happened to him today. I thought about the party tomorrow night at Cavalli's, and why Alessandro had kept it from me until Valentina let it slip. I thought about the extra security, the business tension Valentina had mentioned. All threads in a tapestry I could only see fragments of, a design deliberately kept from my view. The bedroom door opened, and Alessandro appeared, his tie loosened, his expression weary but satisfied, the look of a man who had accomplished what he set out to do. "Come to bed," he said, and it wasn't a request. As I moved toward him, drawn as always by the gravitational pull he exerted on me, I wondered if there would ever come a time when I would know all of him, every shadow, every secret. Or if this partial knowing was the price of loving a man like Alessandro Ricci. What I didn't yet understand was that the events already set in motion would soon force me to confront exactly how much of his world I could bear to see. The morning of Antonio Cavalli's anniversary party dawned bright and clear, sunlight streaming through our bedroom windows to find Alessandro already awake and on the phone, speaking rapid Italian in the low, controlled voice he reserved for business matters. He paced by the windows, his bare torso golden in the morning light, one hand gesturing occasionally to emphasize whatever point he was making. I watched him from the bed, trying to decipher words here and there with my limited Italian. After a year of marriage, I'd picked up enough to follow basic conversations, but when Alessandro switched to the dialect of his childhood, as he did now, I was lost completely. He ended the call when he noticed I was awake, his serious expression melting into a smile that still made my heart skip. "Buongiorno, Bella," he said, coming to sit on the edge of the bed. "Did I wake you?" "No," I lied, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "Everything okay?" His fingers captured mine, bringing them to his lips. "Just business. Nothing for you to worry about. You always say that," I murmured. "Because it's always true." He leaned down to kiss me properly, his hand sliding beneath the sheets to caress my bare hip. "I have a gift for you." "Another one?" I asked, thinking of the emerald dress hanging in the closet. "Sandro, you don't need to keep buying me things." He ignored my protest, moving to retrieve something from the drawer of his nightstand. When he returned, he held a rectangular velvet box. "For tonight," he said, placing it in my hands. I opened it to find a necklace that took my breath away. Emeralds set in platinum, the stones catching the light with an inner fire that seemed almost alive. It was exquisite and unmistakably expensive. "This is too much," I said, running my finger over the largest stone. "I can't accept this." Alessandro's expression hardened slightly. "You're my wife. Nothing is too much." I sat up, clutching the sheet to my chest. "This isn't about the money, Sandro. It's about—" I trailed off, unsure how to explain the discomfort I felt each time he lavished me with gifts I'd never asked for. "It's about what?" he prompted, his voice deceptively soft. "It makes me feel like you're buying me," I admitted finally. "Like I'm just another acquisition." His eyes flashed dangerously. "Is that what you think? That I see you as a possession to be displayed?" "Sometimes," I whispered. Yes, for a moment he was utterly still, and I regretted my honesty. Then he took the necklace from the box and moved behind me, his fingers cool against my skin as he fastened it around my neck. Its weight settled against my collarbone, unfamiliar and somehow binding. "You are the only thing in this world that I truly possess," he said, his lips against my ear, "because you gave yourself to me willingly. Everything else, the money, the power, the fear, I had to take." A shiver ran down my spine, though whether from desire or fear, I couldn't say. Alessandro's hands moved to my shoulders, turning me to face the mirror across the room. The emeralds gleamed against my pale skin, marking me as unmistakably his. "Tonight," he continued, "you will wear this necklace and that green dress, and everyone will see exactly what you are to me. Not a possession, Emma. My heart, walking outside my body." His words melted my resistance as they always did, transforming my unease into a complicated warmth. I leaned back against him, our reflections merging in the mirror, his darkness complementing my light. "I have meetings until this afternoon," he said, pressing a kiss to my temple. "Marco will take you wherever you need to go today." I nodded, not bothering to argue about the security anymore. Something in Alessandro's demeanor told me today wasn't the day to push that particular boundary. After he left, I spent the morning in a state of restless anticipation. I called Diane at Bellini's to apologize for my absence and assure her I'd be in for my shift tomorrow. She sounded distracted, almost nervous, rushing off the phone after telling me not to worry about it. Around noon, unable to stand the confines of the penthouse any longer, I texted Marco that I wanted to go out for lunch. 20 minutes later, I was seated at a small cafe 6 blocks from our building, trying to ignore the presence of Marco and another security member at a nearby table. I was halfway through my salad when my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "Is he keeping you prisoner in a golden cage, little bird?" I stared at the screen, my appetite vanishing. Who would send such a message, and how did they have my private number? Before I could decide how to respond, a second text appeared. "The Harrington family sends their regards." My blood ran cold. James Harrington, the man from the restaurant. Somehow he'd gotten my number, was contacting me directly. What had Alessandro done to provoke this? A third message appeared. "Ask your husband what happened to James. Ask him what he's willing to sacrifice to protect his pretty little waitress wife." My hands shook as I set down the phone. I looked around the cafe, suddenly paranoid that Harrington or his associates might be watching me. The only people paying any attention to me were Marco and his colleague, their expressions changing as they noted my distress. Marco was at my side instantly. "Mrs. Ricci? What's wrong?" I couldn't tell him about the texts. Something told me that would only escalate the situation, whatever it was. "Nothing," I said, forcing a smile. "Just feeling a little unwell suddenly. I'd like to go home." Within minutes, I was back in the Bentley, Marco making a call in rapid Italian from the front seat. I heard Alessandro's name and knew he was reporting my sudden departure. Sure enough, by the time I reached the penthouse, Alessandro was calling. "What happened?" he demanded without preamble. I hesitated, torn between truth and self-preservation. "I felt dizzy," I said finally. "Probably just tired from yesterday." There was a pause, and I could almost feel him weighing my words, searching for the lie. "I'll be home early," he said eventually. "Rest until then." But rest was impossible. I paced our apartment, checking my phone compulsively for more messages, my mind racing with questions. What had Alessandro done to James Harrington? How had Harrington gotten my personal number? And most importantly, what did he mean by what he's willing to sacrifice? By the time Alessandro arrived home, I'd worked myself into such a state of anxiety that I blurted out the truth as soon as he walked through the door. "Someone texted me today," I said, holding out my phone with the messages displayed. "Someone connected to James Harrington." Alessandro's expression didn't change as he read the texts, but the temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. He handed the phone back to me, his movements controlled, deliberate. "Give me a moment," he said quietly, disappearing into his study. I heard him on the phone, his voice too low to make out the words. When he emerged 10 minutes later, he'd removed his suit jacket and loosened his tie, but his face remained an unreadable mask. "You should have told me immediately," he said, pouring himself a whiskey from the bar cart in the corner. "I'm telling you now," I countered. "What did you do to James Harrington, Sandro?" He took a long drink before answering. I reminded him of the importance of respect and generosity, particularly toward those in service positions. "And how exactly did you remind him?" I pressed. Alessandro's dark eyes met mine. "He left the city for a while to reconsider his behavior. Left willingly? Let's say he was strongly encouraged." His tone made it clear this line of questioning was unwelcome. I wrapped my arms around myself, suddenly cold despite the apartment's perfect temperature. "And now his family is threatening me? Threatening us?" "No one is threatening you," Alessandro said firmly. "This," he gestured to my phone, "is a pathetic attempt at intimidation. From a family that has clearly failed to understand who they're dealing with." "What does that mean? What are you going to do?" He set down his glass and crossed the room to me, his hands cupping my face with surprising gentleness. It means you don't need to worry. I'm handling it. That's what scares me, I whispered. Your way of handling things. Pain flashed briefly in his eyes. You knew who I was when you married me, Emma. I knew I loved you, I corrected. I still don't know everything that entails. His thumb stroked my cheekbones. And you never will. Not everything. That's the only way I can keep you safe. Safe from what? From whom? I asked, frustration bubbling up. From the Harringtons? From your enemies? Or from the truth about what you really do? Alessandro's jaw tightened. All of it, he said after a moment. I would burn this city to the ground before I let anyone hurt you, Emma, including me. The raw sincerity in his voice silenced my questions. He believed what he was saying, that his secrets were a form of protection, that the violence and danger of his world could be contained, kept separate from our life together. But those texts proved otherwise. The boundaries were blurring, and I was being drawn inexorably into the darker aspects of Alessandro's existence. We should get ready for the party, he said, releasing me. Antonio doesn't tolerate lateness, even from me. I nodded, recognizing the deliberate change of subject. Will the Harringtons be there tonight? No, he said firmly, they won't. The implication hung between us. They wouldn't dare show their faces anywhere near Alessandro Ricci or his wife, not after whatever had happened with James. As I dressed for the party, I couldn't shake the sense of foreboding that had settled over me. The emerald dress fit perfectly, the silk cool against my skin. When I fastened the necklace Alessandro had given me, its weight felt even heavier than it had that morning, like a beautiful collar, marking me as protected and possessed. Alessandro watched me from the doorway of our closet, his expression softening as I turned to face him. He looked magnificent in his tuxedo. Every inch the powerful man everyone feared and respected. You take my breath away, he said softly. Despite everything, my heart fluttered at the naked adoration in his eyes. Whatever else Alessandro Ricci might be, his love for me was real and consuming. I crossed to him, straightening his bow tie unnecessarily. What will happen tonight? I asked, sensing that this party was more than a simple celebration. His hands settled on my waist. Tonight, we honor Antonio and Bianca's 30 years together. We drink expensive champagne, we dance, and we show everyone that the Ricci and Cavalli families are as strong as ever. There was something in his tone, a hint of steel beneath the casual description, that told me there was more at stake than a simple social appearance. This party was a statement, a demonstration of alliances and power. And the Harringtons? I couldn't help asking. Alessandro's smile didn't reach his eyes. By tomorrow, the Harringtons will understand their place in this city. And so will everyone else. As we rode to Cavalli's estate on the outskirts of the city, surrounded by a convoy of security vehicles, I wondered what exactly would happen to make the Harringtons understand their place. I wondered if I really wanted to know. And most of all, I wondered how much longer I could navigate the dangerous waters of Alessandro's world before I was pulled under completely. Cavalli's estate loomed against the twilight sky like something from another era, a sprawling Italianate mansion surrounded by meticulously landscaped gardens. As our car wound up the long driveway lined with cypress trees, I counted at least a dozen security personnel stationed discreetly among the shadows. Quite a show of force for an anniversary party, I murmured, adjusting the emerald necklace at my throat. Alessandro's hand covered mine, his thumb brushing over my knuckles. Antonio takes his security seriously, especially when hosting so many influential guests. The car stopped at the entrance, where more men in dark suits stood at attention. Marco opened our door, and Alessandro stepped out first, scanning the area before extending his hand to help me. The gesture was both chivalrous and protective, and I realized with a start that he was checking for threats even here, at an event hosted by his closest ally. The foyer of the mansion was a marvel of marble and gilt, illuminated by a massive crystal chandelier. A butler directed us toward the grand ballroom, where the celebration was already underway. As we entered, a subtle ripple of awareness moved through the crowd. Conversations paused, heads turned, eyes assessed. Alessandro guided me with his hand at the small of my back, moving through the assembly with the ease of a man accustomed to commanding attention. I recognized many faces from our wedding and various social events over the past year, the upper echelon of the city's criminal hierarchy and their legitimate business partners, an intricate web of power with Alessandro near its center. "Alessandro! Emma!" Antonio Cavalli's booming voice cut through the murmur of conversation. He approached with arms outstretched, his weathered face creased in a genuine smile. At 65, he maintained the vitality of a much younger man, his silver hair the only concession to age. Beside him, his wife Bianca walked with the quiet dignity of a woman who had spent decades as the partner of a powerful man. Alessandro embraced Antonio warmly, kissing him on both cheeks in the Italian manner. "Antonio, you've outdone yourself. The place looks magnificent. For my Bianca, nothing but the best," Antonio replied, turning to embrace me as well. "And Emma, beautiful as always. The dress is perfect." I smiled, accepting the compliment with practiced ease. "Thank you for inviting us. Happy anniversary to both of you." Bianca took my hands in hers, her dark eyes assessing me with the keen insight that had made her a formidable matriarch in her own right. "You look tired, Cara," she said softly. "Is married life proving challenging?" Before I could respond, Alessandro placed a possessive hand on my waist. My fault entirely. I kept her up late last night. His suggestive tone made my cheeks warm, but I noticed he'd effectively steered the conversation away from any real answer. Bianca's knowing smile told me she hadn't missed this deflection. "Well, perhaps you can spare her for a few minutes. I'd like to show Emma the new paintings in the East Gallery." Alessandro and Antonio exchanged a quick glance, some unspoken communication passing between them. "Of course," Alessandro said smoothly. "I need to discuss some business with Antonio anyway." "Business at a party?" Bianca clicked her tongue disapprovingly. "Men. Always working." She linked her arm through mine. "Come, Emma. Let the men talk their boring talk. I have Monets you haven't seen yet." As she led me away, I glanced back to see Alessandro and Antonio already deep in conversation, their expressions serious. Several other men I recognized from Alessandro's inner circle were gravitating toward them, creating what appeared to be an impromptu meeting within the celebration. "They can't help themselves," Bianca remarked, following my gaze. "Even at our anniversary, the business comes first." The East Gallery was a long room lined with museum-quality artwork, currently empty of other guests. Bianca guided me toward a pair of Monet landscapes, but I sensed the paintings weren't her real reason for separating me from Alessandro. "You've been married to my godson for almost a year now," she said, her accent thicker when we were alone. "How are you finding it?" I considered my words carefully. Bianca Cavalli was not just Antonio's wife. She was a power in her own right, respected and sometimes feared. "It's intense," I admitted finally. "Alessandro is not an easy man to know completely," she laughed, the sound rich and knowing. "No Ricci man ever is. My Antonio still surprises me after 30 years. She touched the emerald necklace at my throat. Expensive gifts, passionate declarations, fierce protection. But the secrets, those never stop. I swallowed hard, struck by how accurately she'd summarized my marriage. "How do you bear it? The not knowing?" Bianca's dark eyes held mine. "Who says I don't know? There's a difference, Emma, between being kept in the dark and choosing not to look too closely at the light." A shiver ran through me at her words. "I'm starting to wonder if I can maintain that distinction because of the Harrington situation?" she asked casually. I stared at her, stunned that she would mention it so directly. "You know about that?" "Of course." She moved to a small settee, positioned to view the artwork, gesturing for me to join her. "When James Harrington disappeared after insulting Alessandro Ricci's wife, everyone in our circle knew. It was precisely the message Alessandro intended to send." "Disappeared?" I echoed, my mouth suddenly dry. "What do you mean, disappeared?" Bianca studied me for a moment, her expression softening. "You truly don't know, do you? What your husband did?" I shook my head, unable to form words around the knot of dread in my throat. She sighed, patting my hand. "Perhaps but understand this, Emma. The text messages today were a desperate move from a desperate family. The Harringtons have influence in banking circles, but they're nothing compared to what your husband commands. She leaned closer, her voice dropping. Whatever Alessandro tells you tonight, whatever he asks of you, remember that everything he does is to protect what's his. And you, my dear, are the most precious thing he possesses. Before I could press for more details, the door to the gallery opened, and Valentina appeared, stunning in a crimson gown that set off her fair coloring. "There you are," she exclaimed. "Sandro sent me to find you. The dinner is about to start." Bianca rose gracefully, the moment of candor vanishing behind her social smile. "We were just admiring the new additions to Antonio's collection. Shall we?" As we rejoined the party, I scanned the ballroom for Alessandro, finding him deep in conversation with Marco near one of the tall windows. His expression was controlled, but I recognized the tension in his jaw, the slight narrowing of his eyes that signaled anger or concern. When he saw me approaching, his features relaxed into a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. "Everything all right?" he asked, his hand automatically finding mine. "Just admiring Bianca's Monets," I replied, studying his face. "Is everything all right with you?" "Of course." He glanced at his watch. Dinner is about to be served. The grand dining room accommodated nearly 100 guests at round tables draped in cream linens and adorned with elaborate floral centerpieces. Alessandro and I were seated at the head table with Antonio and Bianca, along with 2 other couples I recognized as high-ranking members of the Cavalli organization. Throughout the 6-course meal, I watched Alessandro carefully, noting how he barely touched his food, how his attention seemed divided between our table and the entrances to the room, where security personnel maintained a visible presence. Something was wrong. Tension thrummed beneath the veneer of celebration, evident in the quiet conversations, the subtle glances exchanged between Alessandro and Antonio. When dessert was served, an elaborate tiramisu decorated with gold leaf, Antonio rose to toast his wife, his voice carrying across the hushed room. "30 years ago, I married the most beautiful woman in Italy," he began, gazing at Bianca with genuine adoration. "She has been my strength, my conscience, my heart outside my body all these years." I glanced at Alessandro, remembering how he'd used those same words to describe me that morning. His eyes met mine, and for a moment, the rest of the room faded away, leaving only the 2 of us and the complicated love between us. Antonio continued, raising his champagne flute higher. "To my Bianca, who has stood beside me through good times and difficult ones, who has never wavered in her loyalty, who has made all my success meaningful," he turned to address the room at large. "And to all of you who have shared our journey, who have maintained your loyalty through challenges, who understand that family, both blood and chosen, is everything." There was a weight to his words that suggested he was speaking of more than just his marriage. As glasses clinked and applause filled the room, I caught Bianca watching me with sympathy in her dark eyes. After dinner, the celebration moved back to the ballroom, where an orchestra had set up for dancing. Alessandro led me onto the floor for the first waltz, his hand firm at my waist, guiding me with the natural grace he brought to everything. "You've been quiet," he observed, drawing me closer than the dance strictly required. "I've been watching you," I countered. "Something's happening tonight, isn't it? Something more than an anniversary celebration." His steps never faltered, but I felt him tense. "You're too perceptive for your own good, Emma." "Tell me," I insisted softly. "What did you do to James Harrington? And why is everyone here acting like we're at a war council instead of a party?" Alessandro's eyes scanned the room over my shoulder, taking in the security positioned at every exit, the clusters of men engaged in quiet conversation at the edges of the dance floor. "Not here," he murmured. "Later." "No." I stopped dancing, forcing him to pause as well. "Now, Sandro, I need to know what I've been drawn into." For a moment, I thought he would refuse. Then he sighed, guiding me toward one of the French doors that led to a terrace overlooking the gardens. 2 security men followed discreetly, maintaining enough distance for privacy while still keeping watch. The night air was cool against my bare shoulders. Alessandro removed his jacket and draped it around me, the gesture achingly tender despite the tension between us. "James Harrington is alive," he said without preamble. "Contrary to what you might be thinking, I didn't kill him." Relief flooded through me, even as I registered the qualification in his statement. But he made a grave error in judgment, both in how he treated you and in how he responded to my correction of his behavior. Alessandro leaned against the stone balustrade, his profile sharp against the night sky. "The Harringtons are bankers, old money with connections to less reputable financial circles. They launder money for several organizations, including, until recently, some of our operations." "Until recently?" I prompted when he paused. Alessandro's eyes met mine, dark and unreadable in the dim light. "After our encounter, James thought he could retaliate by freezing some of our assets, threatening to expose certain transactions. A foolish move, born of wounded pride and underestimation. The implications slowly dawned on me. So tonight? Tonight is a show of strength," he confirmed. "A reminder to everyone in our world that the Ricci and Cavalli families stand united, that our power remains unchallenged. And a message to the Harringtons that their options have narrowed considerably." "Those texts," I said, remembering the ominous messages on my phone. "Were they a last attempt to find leverage against you?" His jaw tightened. "They thought they could frighten you, use you as a pressure point, another miscalculation." "What happens now?" I asked, my voice barely audible over the distant music from the ballroom. Alessandro's expression softened as he reached out to trace the line of the emerald necklace against my skin. "Now, you understand why I've kept certain aspects of my life separate from ours, why there are things I don't share with you." "To protect me," I murmured, echoing Bianca's words. "Always," he confirmed. "But tonight, I need you to trust me completely. Whatever happens in the next few hours, whatever you see or hear, remember that everything I do is for us, for our future, for our safety." A chill that had nothing to do with the night air ran through me. "You're scaring me, Sandro." He pulled me into his arms, holding me tightly against his chest. I could feel his heartbeat, steady and strong. "Don't be afraid, Mia Cara. By morning, this will be resolved. The Harringtons will understand their new position. Business will stabilize, and we can return to our life. And what exactly will happen to make all that possible?" I asked against his shoulder. "It's better if you don't know the details," he said, kissing the top of my head. "Let's rejoin the party. Antonio will be looking for us." As we turned to go back inside, Marco appeared at the terrace door, his expression urgent. "Boss, there's a situation." Alessandro's posture changed instantly, tension radiating through him. "What kind?" "Visitors at the gate. Unwelcome ones." Alessandro cursed softly in Italian. "Take Emma to Antonio's study. Stay with her." "No," I protested, grabbing his arm. "I'm not being shuttled away like a child. Whatever's happening, I'm staying with you." He stared at me for a long moment, conflict evident in his eyes. Finally, he nodded. "Stay close to me. Do exactly as I say, immediately and without question." "Understood?" I swallowed hard, suddenly aware that I was crossing a threshold I couldn't return from. "Understood." Marco led us through a side door, avoiding the main ballroom, and into a wood-paneled corridor lined with priceless artwork. Alessandro kept his hand firmly on my lower back, guiding me with subtle pressure. The air felt charged, like the stillness before a thunderstorm. "Who's at the gate?" Alessandro asked Marco, his voice low and controlled. "James Harrington and his father, plus 2 others. They claim they were invited." Alessandro's expression hardened. "By whom?" "They wouldn't say. Security is holding them, but Mr. Cavalli wanted to consult with you before turning them away." We reached a heavy oak door, which Marco opened after a quick knock. Inside, Antonio Cavalli stood behind an imposing desk, flanked by 2 men I recognized from Alessandro's inner circle: Vincent, his consigliere, and Dominic, who handled security operations. Antonio's eyebrows rose slightly when he saw me. "Emma, I thought perhaps you might prefer to rejoin the ladies in the ballroom." "She stays," Alessandro said before I could respond. "What's Harrington playing at showing up here?" Antonio sighed, gesturing toward a decanter of amber liquid. Drink? I think we might need it. Without waiting for an answer, he poured 4 glasses of what looked like expensive scotch. The Harringtons claim they received a formal invitation from me. Impossible, Alessandro said sharply. You'd never. Of course not, Antonio cut in. But someone went to considerable trouble to make it appear so. The invitation they presented at the gate is an excellent forgery, right down to my personal seal. I accepted the glass Antonio offered, grateful for something to do with my hands. Why would anyone want to lure them here tonight? All eyes turned to me, as if suddenly remembering I was in the room. Antonio was the first to recover. A valid question, my dear. Alessandro, your wife has good instincts. Alessandro's jaw tightened. It's a provocation. Someone wants to force a confrontation between us and the Harringtons, here, tonight. But why? I pressed. Who benefits from that? Vincent, a thin man with shrewd eyes, cleared his throat. The Mancinis would be my guess. They've been trying to move into Harrington's banking territory for months. If we eliminate the Harringtons, it creates a vacuum the Mancinis could fill, and damages our relationship with the legitimate financial community in the process, Dominic added. It's clever. We look like thugs, and they step in as the reasonable alternative. Alessandro set down his untouched drink. So we send them away. Deny them entry. Make it clear they were misled. No, I said suddenly, surprising even myself. That's exactly what whoever set this up wants. A public rejection, a scene at the gates that everyone will hear about. Antonio smiled slightly. As I said, good instincts. Alessandro studied me for a moment, his expression unreadable. What do you suggest, then? I took a deep breath, scarcely believing I was about to offer strategy in this world I'd tried so hard to stay separate from. Invite them in. Make it clear you know the invitation was false, but that you're willing to be gracious. Use the opportunity to dictate terms, rather than create a spectacle. A long silence followed my words. Antonio broke it with a short laugh. Your wife is not just beautiful, Alessandro. She's formidable. I've always known that, Alessandro replied quietly, his eyes never leaving mine. I saw pride there, but also concern, as if I'd just revealed a side of myself that complicated his efforts to keep me separate from his business. Antonio turned to Marco. Bring the Harringtons to the small salon off the west corridor. Tell them Mr. Cavalli and Mr. Ricci will join them shortly to discuss a misunderstanding. After Marco left, Antonio refilled his glass. Emma has presented us with an elegant solution. However, he looked at me directly, I think it best if you return to the party while we handle this discussion. Before Alessandro could object, I placed my hand on his arm. He's right. I've said my piece. The rest isn't for me to witness. Relief and gratitude flashed in Alessandro's eyes. Vincent will escort you back to the ballroom. Stay with Bianca and Valentina until I come for you. I nodded, understanding that I'd ventured as far into his world as he would allow tonight. As Vincent led me toward the door, Alessandro caught my hand, pulling me back for a brief but fierce kiss. You continue to surprise me, Emma Ricci, he murmured against my lips. In the corridor, Vincent walked silently beside me, his alert eyes constantly scanning our surroundings. I'd spoken with him only a handful of times in the year I'd known Alessandro, but I sensed he approved of my suggestion in the study. Mr. Ricci is fortunate to have you, he said as we neared the ballroom. Few women could navigate these waters with such grace. I'm not sure what you mean, I replied carefully. Vincent's thin lips curved in a knowing smile. You recognized the trap and offered a solution that serves our interests without bloodshed. That's rare insight from someone not raised in this life. His words sent an unexpected warmth through me. Pride, I realized with a start. Pride at being able to hold my own in Alessandro's world, at being more than just the beautiful waitress he'd married. In the ballroom, the celebration continued uninterrupted, the orchestra playing a lively waltz as couples spun across the dance floor. No one would guess that a potential crisis was unfolding just corridors away. I found Bianca and Valentina near the champagne fountain, deep in conversation that stopped abruptly when they saw me approach. There you are, Valentina exclaimed with forced brightness. We were just wondering where you'd disappeared to. Bianca's shrewd eyes assessed me. Everything all right, Kara? Just fine. I said, accepting a flute of champagne from a passing waiter. Alessandro and Antonio are handling some unexpected business. Understanding passed between us. Bianca clearly knew exactly what unexpected business meant. Men, she said with a practiced sigh, always working, even at parties. I heard the Harringtons might make an appearance tonight, Valentina said casually, watching my reaction from behind her champagne glass. So she knew as well. I wondered if everyone at this party was aware of the drama unfolding except me. Who told you that? She shrugged elegantly. People talk. Especially when James Harrington goes missing for 3 days after insulting a certain powerful man's wife. 3 days? I repeated, the champagne suddenly sour in my mouth. He was missing for 3 days? Valentina's eyes widened as she realized she'd revealed something I didn't know. I assumed Sandro told you. Valentina, Bianca said sharply. Perhaps you'd be so kind as to check if Antonio's sister has arrived yet. I believe her flight was delayed. With a guilty glance at me, Valentina nodded and moved away, leaving Bianca and me alone at the edge of the dance floor. Your husband protected you from certain details, Bianca said quietly. Don't be angry with him for that. What happened to James Harrington during those 3 days? I asked, keeping my voice steady with effort. Bianca sighed, setting down her champagne. Alessandro made his point. That's all you need to know. That's not enough anymore, I said, surprising myself with my firmness. I just advised Antonio and Alessandro on how to handle a potential trap set by their enemies. I'm already involved, whether Alessandro wants to admit it or not. Bianca studied me for a long moment, then nodded slightly. Walk with me. She led me through French doors onto a different terrace than the one Alessandro and I had used earlier. This one overlooked a formal rose garden, moonlight silvering the perfectly trimmed hedges. When Antonio and I married, she began, her accented voice soft in the night air. I was younger than you are now. I knew he was connected, involved in things not entirely legitimate. But I didn't understand what that really meant until the first time someone threatened him, threatened us. She paused, gazing out at the darkened gardens. One night, Antonio came home with blood on his shirt. Not his blood. He wouldn't tell me whose it was or what had happened. We fought, our first serious fight. I told him I couldn't live with secrets, with not knowing. What did he say? I asked, drawn into her story despite myself. He said knowledge was a burden, and he loved me too much to make me carry it. Bianca's lips curved in a sad smile. I told him I was stronger than he thought, that I could carry whatever burden came with loving him. And he told me everything. About the man who'd threatened to expose our operations to the police, who'd promised to destroy everything Antonio had built. About how that man had suddenly found reason to change his mind. She turned to face me directly. I didn't sleep for 3 nights afterward, knowing what my husband was capable of. I swallowed hard, understanding the parallel she was drawing. How did you reconcile it, the man you loved with the things he'd done? I realized there was no separation. The man who could be ruthless with his enemies was the same man who loved me tenderly, who would die to protect our children, who kept his word no matter the cost. The capacity for violence and the capacity for love came from the same place, an absolute commitment to what he valued. Her words echoed in my mind, illuminating aspects of Alessandro I'd tried to keep compartmentalized. The possessiveness I sometimes resented was the shadow side of a devotion so complete it terrified me. James Harrington insulted you, disrespected you publicly, Bianca continued. Alessandro couldn't allow that to stand, not just because of his pride, but because in our world, showing weakness invites attack. If he let Harrington's behavior go unpunished, others would see you, and by extension Alessandro himself, as vulnerable. So he what? Tortured him for 3 days? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Bianca shook her head. No, Kara. He educated him, showed him exactly what it means to be truly powerless, truly at someone else's mercy. And then he sent him home with a choice, work with us on our terms, or lose everything. And now James and his father are here, tonight. Yes, Bianca smiled slightly. Which means they've made their choice. Whatever happens in that salon now, there won't be violence. Your husband has already won. Relief washed through me, followed immediately by a more complicated emotion. Pride again. but tinged with something darker, pride in Alessandro's power, in his ability to command respect and fear. Was this how it began? The slow acceptance of a world where violence or its threat was simply another business tool? Before I could pursue that troubling thought, the French doors opened, and Alessandro appeared, his expression calm but triumphant. He nodded respectfully to Bianca. "May I steal my wife for a moment?" "Of course." Bianca touched my cheek gently. "Remember what I said, Emma. There is no separation." Alessandro led me to a more secluded part of the terrace, his hand warm against my bare back. "It's done," he said simply. "The Harringtons have accepted our terms. Their banking operations will continue to service our needs, with more favorable conditions than before. And the text messages? The threats? A misunderstanding," he said smoothly. "James's younger brother acting without authorization. He's been reassigned to their London office, effective immediately." I studied his face in the moonlight, searching for signs of the violence Bianca had alluded to, but found only my husband, handsome, controlled, watching me with eyes that contained both tenderness and shadows. "Why didn't you tell me he was missing for 3 days?" I asked. Alessandro stiffened slightly. "Valentina talks too much. That's not an answer." He sighed, running a hand through his dark hair. "What would you have had me say, Emma? That I had your harasser held in a warehouse for 3 days to ensure he understood the consequences of disrespecting you? That I showed him exactly how easily I could destroy everything he values? Would that knowledge have made you sleep better at night?" Put that way, I had to admit it wouldn't have. "No. But I still deserve the truth. You deserve peace," he countered. "Safety. A life not tainted by the uglier aspects of mine. That's not possible," I said quietly. "Not anymore. Maybe it never was." He took my face in his hands, his expression suddenly vulnerable in a way I rarely saw. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying there is no separation," I echoed Bianca's words. "The man who would hurt James Harrington for insulting me is the same man who holds me like I'm made of glass. The man who commands fear in this city is the same one who notices when I've been crying from across a room." Alessandro's eyes darkened. "And can you accept that? All of it?" I considered the question carefully, feeling the weight of the emerald necklace against my throat, the warmth of his hands on my face. Could I accept the entirety of the man I'd married, knowing now what he was capable of? "I think," I said slowly, "that I've been accepting it all along, piece by piece." Tonight just made it impossible to pretend otherwise. Relief washed over his features, followed by a love so fierce it nearly took my breath away. "I would give all of this up for you, if you asked," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Everything except you." "I'm not asking that," I assured him, reaching up to trace the line of his jaw. "I'm just asking for honesty between us. No more shielding me from the truth, no matter how ugly. Even if it changes how you see me." "Nothing could change how I see you, Sandro. You're my heart outside my body, too." He kissed me then, deep and possessive, sealing our new understanding. When we finally broke apart, the party continued behind us, music and laughter spilling through the open doors. But something fundamental had shifted between us. A wall breached, a boundary dissolved. Alessandro smiled, offering his arm to lead me back inside. "Shall we dance, Mrs. Ricci?" I slipped my hand into the crook of his elbow, feeling the solid strength of him against me. "Lead the way." As we rejoined the celebration, I caught sight of Bianca watching us from across the room, approval in her dark eyes. I would never be the same innocent waitress Alessandro had first met at Bellini's. That part of me was gone, transformed by the truth of who my husband was, and the world we now fully shared. But in its place was something stronger. A woman who could stand beside Alessandro Ricci as a true partner, eyes wide open to both the darkness and the light. And as we moved across the dance floor in perfect synchrony, I realized that this was the real gift he'd given me, far more valuable than emeralds or luxury. The truth, and the chance to choose it anyway.